Welcome to the Board Game Design Lab podcast. Each week, we want to bring you an insightful interview on a specific topic in board game design to help you design and create games people love. And now, here's your host, Gabe Barrett.
Welcome to the Board Game Design Lab. Here today, my friend Jamey Stegmaier of Stegmaier Games, the guy that's created Scythe, what might be the best game in the country right now. People are saying it's the best of the year. I'm one of those people. I think it's an amazing game. Jamey's the Kickstarter guru. You might know him on his blog. He's got more information about Kickstarter than I think all the internet combined. And so if you're running a Kickstarter, check out his blog over at Stegmaier. Is it StegmaierGames.com?
Stegmaier Games, yeah.
Yeah. So Jamey, really appreciate you being on the show, man. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabe, for your first episode, apparently, maybe, right?
Episode 1, and I was telling you earlier, you are the first-round draft pick. Like, you were the guy, when I was making the big, long list, brainstorming potential guests and game designers and publishers and Tom Bassel, all the people in the gaming community. You were the guy I was like, if I could, who do I want for episode 1? Jamey Stegmaier. That's the guy I want. And I actually waited a little while before I emailed you because I was a little nervous that you'd say no. And I didn't want my dreams to be crushed there at the beginning. And so I actually emailed you later. But what's funny is the people I emailed first said no, and you said yes. So
really?
I should have just gone right to you. Anyway, there's a lesson to be learned there. Just go for it. Just take the risk. So anyway, I really appreciate you being on here. Episode 1, really excited about this podcast. I've already got some really incredible guests lined up for the next 12 episodes. I mean, it's just been crazy, the people just responding to me and wanting to jump into these different specific topics in game design. And so today we're talking about what no one tells you when you first get started in board games, in board game design. We're going to look at a few different specific topics inside that topic. But Jamey, you've been expert. You've been around since 2013. Launched your first game in 2013. Is that right? Viticulture?
That was when Viticulture was released. Yeah.
But you started when? When did you really get into board game design?
I started when I was really young. When I was 6 or 7, I started designing games. So I have a few things that came to mind when I was thinking about things I wish people had told me then, and then we can jump to like adult stuff. But like back then when I was designing games, it was definitely just for fun. Usually I would play a game and then make my version of it. Like I think my first game design was something called like Medieval Quest, and it was basically Monopoly, but in the world of medieval games.
Yeah.
And I think with that one, I think the one thing I wish people had told me, and this is kind of an overarching theme, was that after I wrote down the rules and made the board, I felt like I had designed a game, and technically I had, but really that's just like the tip of the iceberg for the game design process. Like the first prototype is not a designed game, right? And I kind of wish someone pointed that out to me, but I'm sure, I was 6 or 7, no one was going to tell me, Jamey, you didn't actually design a game. That just got all encouragement back then. So that would have been helpful to hear, that's just like the very beginning of the process to have that first prototype.
Gotcha. So what you're saying is when my daughter, who's 5 right now, when she's got my little game components and she's designing, I need to tell her, have you play tested it? Because until you play test it, this is just an idea. Is that what I need to be doing? Okay, I'm gonna write that down. Gotcha. So, all right. So you designed games as a kid, and then did you just kind of continue on until you became an adult, or was there like a gap in between of design?
There were some gaps. I mean, when I was young, I had a lot of time, and so I did a lot. And then as I got older, maybe every couple of years, I'd have an idea that I'd pursue, and I'd make that. And this is why I mentioned that advice, because I'd make every time I'd make that first game, and we'd play it once, and that would be it. And I wish I just even played it one more time and treated it like a play test. And so, yeah, I did that every couple of years leading up to, I guess, my adult life when I discovered games like Settlers of Catan and Agricola. And that's when I started thinking about it again. And at that point, what I did was I designed some expansions for those games. And that was actually a really helpful design tool to take a game that had already been extensively play tested and published, and to spin off an expansion for it. That was a fun design challenge. So I guess somebody didn't have to tell me that, but I happened to do it.
Right. Now, were any of those things that you tried to get published, or was it just trying to figure out design for yourself?
It was just me trying to figure out design for myself. But now that I'm a publisher, I realized that when I design a game, I try to put all of my ideas into that game, and then sometimes I'll revisit it and think of some expansion ideas for it. But sometimes I don't have any of those ideas. And so if I'll say this to other designers out there. If you ever spend a lot of time on an expansion to a game that you just feel is like a fan-made thing and that you would never approach a publisher with it, if it actually is really awesome, a publisher or another designer might really appreciate that because they may have run out of ideas. So that I like that you said that, because I hope other designers, even if they're just playing around with an idea and they've developed it and play tested it, publishers want to hear about that, or even designers want to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a publisher, from their standpoint, anything that can add to a game, that can help them make money, they can create a better experience for their customers, they're going to listen to you. They're going to want to hear you out. So that's great advice, man. You run the risk of creating something and putting a lot of time in it and nobody wanting it. And if it's got a specific IP, if you're trying to make a Catan expansion, well, it's hard to turn that into another type of game. But if you really believe in what you're doing, go for it. Excellent. And so you did the expansions. Now, Viticulture was your first game, came out in 2013. But when did you really start working on that?
That I started working on in kind of the fall of 2011. And there are, I guess, two main things that I wish someone had told me when I was working on that. The first one being, actually three. I'll hit them real fast, and you can let me know if any of these are interesting to you.
Yeah.
The first is, I wish I had known the value of blind playtesting. I had local playtesters, friends that I playtest with, and they're blunt friends. They'll give me honest feedback. But the value of blind playtesting is really being able to put together, a complete package, especially the rules, sending it off to someone who doesn't know you, doesn't care about your feelings, and tries to learn the game from those rules and play them. And that is just so valuable. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't really realize how important that was, and I wish I had. The second thing that I wish someone had told me is that I wish people had told me, and I really should have figured this out on my own, I should have been more active in the board game community, especially the online community at that time. There's a wonderfully robust and healthy and just an amazing board game community, especially on Board Game Geek, but there are other places too to talk about board games. And I wish I had been more involved in that, both for a design perspective and kind of so I could appreciate it, and for a marketing perspective, so that when it comes time for me to sell my game, that I'm not approaching people for the first time and saying, hey, here's my thing, you want to talk about it? Mm-hmm. I would have already established those relationships. And then the last thing that came to mind is that I wish I'd played a much broader variety of games at that point. At that point, I played Settlers, I had played Agricola, I had played Stone Age and a few others, but really I wish I had played a lot more games and a much broader array of games at that point, not just like Euro games. I wish I had dabbled in a lot of different areas, because I've learned so much since then from playing tons and tons of different games, and from listening to podcasts like yours, what yours will become, and listening to reviewers, and just consuming as much information about a wide spectrum of games as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's just go through each point. Blind playtesting, that's something that nobody tells you as a designer, that you don't think about it as yourself. You don't just come up with this idea, I need to take this to total strangers who don't know me, don't like me, and let them play it. Because what happens is you let your mom play it, and your cousin, and your dog, and they all love it. And you're like, man, I've created the next Monopoly. I've got the next best game. I'm going to be a bazillionaire. And it's not the case. And so it's so important to have people who have no investment in your life whatsoever. They can say, yeah, this is garbage, because you're going to save yourself so much time and energy and frustration in the long run by knowing that early. It's funny. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he had this idea, and he was, super pumped. He was so excited for this idea. It was going to be the next best thing. And I said, well, have you done any blind playtesting? And he looked at me and he said, like with Braille? Like, no, my game's not going to have Braille on it. Like people with disabilities? Like, oh my gosh. Like, no. And just having to explain what blind playtesting really is, it's probably the most valuable thing you can do. Is just get in front of people, especially with that rule book, and say, here's the rules, step back, and just see what happens.
Right.
And take notes and watch body language and watch how people are, are they on their phone during your game? Are they engaged? Are they getting up to go get a sandwich? You learn so much about this. And this is one thing I love about board game design that you don't get in other creative venues like art or books or whatever, is you get this player engagement, this customer engagement that's unlike anything else. And it's a lot of fun, but it's also extraordinarily difficult. And People need to know that on the front end. So if you're designing a game right now and you've got a cool idea and you're not blind playtesting it, you need to blind playtest. And
something I've started doing with that too is I have, like, because I'm rarely there in the room when it's happening, I usually send it out. I've been having people videotape their playtest, and so I can watch. And this is something I learned from Rob Daviau and Matt Leacock when they were doing Pandemic Legacy playtesting. They would videotape it and they would watch that stuff that, like you said, when people are looking at their phones, when people when they like spend longer discussing a rule than you think would be possible because they're confused about the way you phrased it. When they're actually having fun, like when they're laughing, when they're smiling, when they're really thinking, you can see all that on camera. Yeah. That's really what, and especially on a camera, it's a more efficient use of your time as a designer because you can skip through the video. You can play it at 2 times speed if you want, on YouTube at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And let's be fair. Anything that they did for Pandemic Legacy, we need to figure out and do it again because that's the #1 game in the world right now. Right. So let's copy that. But, I played football in college, and, man, watching film, hours and hours and hours a week watching film on everything. We would watch the way that we, like, stretched and warmed up. Like, they filmed everything, and we'd go back and look at that. But we had a big sign in our film room, our big team room, and it said, "You are what you put on tape." Like, it doesn't matter what you think you are, what you believe down in your heart. You are what the tape says you are. And if you miss a tackle, if you're not doing well in the tape, that's who you are. Right. And so, man, that's hugely valuable. And I love that idea of filming it. There's a little more to it. But gosh, the value of being able to watch it, go back and rewind it and watch it again. Because if you're there in the room, you can't watch everybody at the same time. You know? And so the tape allows you to kind of focus in on everybody. Man, that's awesome. Right. Second thing, community. That keeps coming up, and people I talk to that release games that they thought, man, I had this great idea, but then nobody bought it. Well, did anybody know about it before your Kickstarter, before it got published or whatever? And the answer is usually no. It's like, well, do you have an email list? What's that? Oh, okay. Well, we got to start from the beginning. Do you have a website? Do you have anything to let people get excited? Bring them in and get them on the team. I know you talk a lot on your blog about having ambassadors. And we can kind of go into that because that's something nobody talks about when you're first getting started. It's having ambassadors and mobilizing people. And how did you come to have that idea? Where did that come from?
That came from after Viticulture was on Kickstarter, or kind of while it was on Kickstarter. I started noticing that, and this is something I just had no idea that people would volunteer their time to do anything, right? Because I understand how that works in like charities and nonprofit organizations. But I just didn't have a concept of that in a profit-driven world. But people are so passionate about board games and many things, but board games in particular. I kept finding more and more people just volunteering their time to proofread or to play test or to moderate the forums and just answer questions. And I was just amazed by that. And so I wanted a way to figure out who those people were who were really passionate about Stegmaier games in particular and wanted to continually volunteer their time rather than just every now and then. And that's how I started the ambassador program.
Gosh, what I find is people want to be on the team. Like they want to be they want to be a part of it. If you think going back kind of a sports mentality, what do people say? They say we won. Well, you weren't on the field. Like you were up in the sand. You were watching from home on TV. Who is we? But people want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, and that translates into games and building that community. And you've done an incredible job building a community over at Stegmaier Games on your blog, on your Facebook page, and you're posting stuff all the time. You're posting updates, and that keeps people engaged. That keeps people aware of what you're doing and keeps them excited. And then you have this group of raving fans that become your marketing. That you don't have to go out and spend $1 million on marketing because you have the word of mouth. And the word of mouth, people trust that more than anything anyway. And so, man, it's hugely valuable. So if you can start building the community from day one as opposed to trying to catch up, you're going to be at such an advantage, way further ahead than most people.
Right.
And then that third point, playing games. I've got there's a couple of links on the Board Game Design Lab site that actually link to blogs and articles where people say, play these games. If you're just starting out as a designer, play these games, and here's why, and it kind of gives you a whole just variety of different kinds of games. Some of them are really good. Some of them are really bad. Like some games are really bad, but you need to play those too so you understand what makes a bad game as much as a good game. And I'll put the links to those in the show notes. Any games in particular you would suggest to people to play?
Well, one that I mentioned in the past that was just a surprise to me, because I love Euro games so much, and I don't enjoy party games. Mm-hmm. But then someone introduced Telestrations to me. Have you played Telestrations?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just have a blast playing Telestrations. I love it. And it's I I don't know. I've learned a lot of things just by playing games like that just were so far out of my comfort zone that have informed the designs that I make. And so it's one of those things where I had a closed door basically to that entire genre of games, and that one game opened that door to all of them. Yeah,
definitely. And with any other creative thing, you're going to become a better writer by reading more books.
Exactly.
And that's just the way it is. You learn what works. You learn what other great people are doing. And you learn how to copy. It is what it is. You learn how to emulate them. But then you find your own voice. And what you're saying about absorbing just as much information as you possibly can, that's gonna give you your own voice out of all the stuff you're absorbing. You can kind of figure out, who do I want to be? And you can kind of decide which path you want to take.
Yeah.
Definitely. So let's kind of jump into, all right, so what did people not tell you wish they had about, like, specifically design, as far as like mechanics or working with theme or anything like that?
Well, there's always a debate of like, do you start with the mechanism or with the theme?
Right.
And I don't think there's like a consensus answer, and I wouldn't want someone to tell me that one is correct over the other. I kind of just found my own process for that. But I wish the thing about that I wish someone had told me fairly early on, and that I realized fairly early on, was that in the end, it's not really the theme or the mechanisms that matter. What matters is that the gamers have, the players have interesting choices and that they're having fun.
Yeah. And
so sometimes that means that I have to sacrifice a thematic element so that people can have more fun, or I have to sacrifice a mechanism that I was really, really excited about because people aren't having fun with it, or because there aren't interesting choices in that mechanism. So I kind of that's something that I always kind of keep in mind, and that I recommend other designers.
No, absolutely. I mean, people play games to have fun. That's why we do it.
Right.
There's all sorts of opportunities to do a million things right now in our world. I play a game because I want to have an enjoyable experience with my friends. What I told somebody the other day was, don't create a game, create a fun engine, and that when people put time into your engine, they get fun out. Right.
Yeah.
And just, create this experience, because you can have the coolest, most just amazing, complex mechanics in the world, but if people play your game and hate it, they don't enjoy it, they're not going to play it again. And so, what are you really trying to accomplish as a designer? Are you wanting to make sure everybody knows how smart you are and how clever you are and, all these things you've learned? Or do you want people to enjoy your games? And I think that's the difference. And telling people that early on so that they'll not get so caught up in the complicated mechanisms and all that stuff. Yeah, make complicated mechanisms, but make them fun. Make them enjoyable.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Something else that comes to mind, too, Gabe, in that realm is, as a designer, early on, I designed games that I wanted to play.
Yeah.
Which is still relevant, and I need to be excited about a game. Like the game that I'm designing right now, I'm excited to play it. That's good. But what I've learned is that after one of my games is released, I actually spend a lot more time teaching the game than actually playing it. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of changed that mindset a little bit, and when I'm designing the game, instead of making a game that I'm excited to play, I make a game that I'm excited and eager to teach, and that I'm not annoyed to teach. Because, there's some games that are annoying to teach or annoying to learn. And I think that's a big barrier to entry to anyone who wants to play a game or teach a game. But it's something I do recommend to designers, that remember that you're going to be teaching this game a lot, and you're probably not going to be playing it all that often.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think we all have games on our shelves where if someone says, hey, what about that game? You go, yeah, I don't feel like teaching that right now.
Yeah.
Let's play something different. Let's do something else. And so that's a great point to design a game with that in mind, Yeah. And then, yes, you're true. You're going to teach the thing a million times at conventions, at play tests, just telling people about it. And, man, that's a great point. I read an article the other day about designing your game with story in mind as far as your rules go, like designing your rule book with story in mind so it flows well and it's easy to understand, easy to teach. And people don't teach that either. When you're first writing rules, it's like very robotic, A to B to C, as opposed to the flow. But people learn through story.
Right.
And so
they remember through story too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
best books we read usually aren't the self-help books that tell you do this, do this, do that. It's the ones that give you a story that kind of you pull the information out of. Absolutely. Totally. Anything else to add on the design stuff? Things you wish you'd known?
Something that I wish someone had told me was to avoid exceptions to the rules as much as possible. It kind of ties into what you're saying about story because it helps people learn it, helps people remember it. If you have a lot of little exceptions to the rules, it means people might spend a lot more time looking at the rule book the first, the second, the fifth time they play it, trying to remember those little things that are different than everything else in the game. And so when I finish a rule book, I always do a search of that rule book for the word except or unless, words like that like indicate that something is different than the usual circumstance. And then sometimes it is necessary to have them, but I try to cut down on as many as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have the outlier cases where some random chain of events creates this weird thing in your rules, and you know that happens. But making it as simple as possible, so people aren't living in the rule book, so they're actually living at the table and enjoying the experience. Definitely. What about with art? You know, what are some of the things that people didn't tell you about with art or working with artists and all that when you were first getting started?
Yeah. So with viticulture, when I was thinking about the art for the game, I have an artist friend that I hold in high regards. He's a good guy, and so I figured, okay, well, I can kill two birds with one stone. I can help a friend. I can make him some money because I was going to pay him for the art, and I can have great art for viticulture. And so my search for an artist, there was no search at all. It was just, okay, I've got this guy who I know who can probably do it. And that art isn't in viticulture. That's actually on the Kickstarter page because I can't edit it, but it's not in the final version of viticulture because his style of art ended up not really being good for the type of game viticulture needs to be. And he does everything by hand, and so it doesn't translate well to the digital world. Yeah. So basically, I really, instead of picking a friend and going to a friend, I wish I'd gone to everyone else and found a bunch of artists that I like their styles, gone to them, seeing if they were interested, seeing what kind of a budget I could have gotten them for. And that would have saved me time and money because I ended up paying this artist and then switching to another artist and paying that artist as well. Gotcha.
So yeah. Look for options. Definitely.
Especially outside of your friendships, because I
had a similar thing. My first Kickstarter was actually a book, just a little zombie book I had written years ago, and I wanted to put some illustrations in there. And I had a friend, same scenario, had a good friend. He's a pretty good artist, and it took forever for him to finish. But he's my friend, so it's hard to get angry at it. You can't really fire your friend. I mean, you can, but it creates problems. And so I'm right there with you on that. Find somebody else. Find somebody, kind of going back into blind play testing. Find people that don't know you necessarily, that don't have some big investment in your life. You don't have to see them at Thanksgiving or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
No doubt. What about with graphic design? So it's kind of a similar avenue, but then very different. So what about with graphic design?
Well, I actually did the same exact thing with graphic design. So I learned from that up front. I think maybe the big thing with graphic design is that there are graphic designers who are really good at designing the user interface and the iconology, designing great icons and designing like card frames. A great card frame can really help any card look better. Yeah. And then there are also graphic designers. Sometimes they're the same person, but I found that more and more often they're different people. There are graphic designers who are really good at all the under the surface stuff, the stuff that I don't understand, like how to prepare printer files so they're just perfect, how to layer them perfectly. And usually I found that they're just different people. A graphic designer who's great with an icon may not be great at taking very specific instructions from a printer and getting those printer instructions right. And you need both of them.
Yeah.
So if you're lucky, maybe you can find somebody that does both of those things. But I found that I need to divide up those tasks between two different people.
Gotcha. And also not assuming that somebody knows exactly what they're doing for anything. Is asking the question, hey, do you know how to submit in this kind of a file format or change things?
Right.
Definitely.
Especially that icon thing can be misleading because you could find a graphic designer who makes these beautiful icons and you're like, okay, they must be good at everything. But exactly what you said, that surface level stuff is just a small part of what a graphic designer does when they're preparing something for print.
Right. And I think there's also a lot of value in finding people who have already been through this and saying and asking these questions, not just assuming you know it all, not just assuming that a graphic designer is going to tell you everything, but going to people who have done Kickstarters or published games and asking those questions, those in-depth questions that you have no idea about. Like I have no idea about graphic design. I know nothing, And so finding people who do and then listening to them and finding advice. That's why your blog is such a valuable resource, is people can go there and find I don't know if there's any stones you have left unturned. I mean, you've kind of gone through the full gamut over the last couple of years of everything from Kickstarter to art to graphic design to marketing to community, all those different things. And so it's awesome to have that kind of a resource.
Something, Gabe, here, before we move on from art and graphic design, because we're talking probably to a lot of designers right now who maybe some of them want to be publishers as well, or self-publishers, but some of them may just want to be designers. And if that's the case, when you submit to a publisher, the publisher doesn't really want art or graphic design done. Yeah. They want a clean prototype to play with, but they don't want you to have spent a lot of money on art because they're probably going to scratch that, get rid of that art and make their own or hire their own artists. Yeah. So that's something I think, if you're just a designer who wants to have someone else publish your game, it's one less thing to worry about, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Have art that works, that shows what this, this card is. You can have a little stock image or clip art or whatever. Exactly. But how much would be too much for somebody to spend on a game? Like a big game, not like a little tiny game, but like a big game. How much would be too much to spend?
If they're going to submit to a publisher?
Yeah, right.
Ooh, I mean, I think at most they could pay for like one or two representative images that really capture the feeling that they want the game and the art to evoke. But spending much more than that, I mean, it's up to you if a designer wants to do it, but I can't imagine anyone feeling good about that in the end when the publisher inevitably says, we're using a different artist. Yeah. All this money that you spent is going to go to waste.
Or we're changing the theme entirely.
Changing the theme entirely, yeah. That could definitely happen. Yeah.
Right. And so, gosh, I was one of these people. Early on, I had this game, really cool idea, and then just jumped all in and spent, not crazy amount, just a few $100s. But it's like, man, was that money really well spent? Because now it's still just a prototype on my shelf, right. But I invested the money in it and all that. It's like, well, I probably could use that money for something else. Right. But you get excited, you got this new thing, this new creature you've created, and you want to jump in, but just take a step back and be a little smarter about how you spend your time and your money. Because another thing that'll happen to people is they'll get really caught up in the process of the art. You know what I mean? And so instead of using their time to design, they're over there contacting artists and looking on Tumblr or DeviantArt or whatever, trying to find art. It's like, well, you could use that time to actually design your game or play test it a bunch more or whatever, and you're probably better off using your time for that.
That's great advice. I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Right. Or if you got an idea for a game and you're already contacting Panda Publishing trying to get a quote, it's like, what? And you feel like you're working. You feel like you're doing something towards your game, but you probably would be better off just using your time to play test or create more of your game.
That's true. Although I think there's a good side of that too. That might be too early to contact Panda, but learning about how much components cost.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that.
Can be pretty big for design because you might be designing a game around a component that you're really excited about or a series of components you're really excited about. And the game might end up really dependent on those components. And then you might get that quote from Panda, or you might send the game off to a publisher and they already know how much those things cost. And it's going to be $100 game, because of how expensive that is. And that, not to manufacture, but to sell, the MSRP. And so I think having some idea of how much manufacturing costs are for different components can actually be pretty helpful in informing your design.
That's a great point. Do you know of a way to do it faster than contacting an actual manufacturer? Because going through the Panda quote process takes, it's not a quick process. So is there a better place to find the numbers for those things?
Well, I think going on they could probably comment on a website like yours, and you could help them. You could go on the Board Game Designers forum. There's a forum for that. On Facebook, there are different groups. Usually, there's at least some people in those groups who have gone through that process and kind of have a rough idea. And if it truly is a new component that no one has made before, then that's a reason that you go to Panda. You can just email them directly to see. But usually if you post on one of those forums, I think someone is going to chime in and give you a rough idea.
Right. That's a great idea. There's so many people on those forums and Facebook groups that have done this and would love to share that information and would love to share what they did wrong and say, hey, don't do this. Don't use this component. Don't use this company, whatever it is, and kind of help people through what they've learned. Another thing I do, I'll go to the Game Crafter and just see how much it costs to get one on them, because I know, their costs are a little inflated because they're having to make money, so they up their cost a little bit, but you can still get an idea how much a die will cost, how much a wooden token, whatever, and you can kind of get a snapshot at least of what a game might cost roughly. Yeah. So that's another thing I would recommend.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that.
Well, cool. Well, let's move on to another one. What did nobody tell you about Kickstarter that you really wish you had known back with viticulture?
A lot.
Yeah.
That's a huge topic. Let's pick one or two things.
Yeah, just the big ones.
One of the big ones you already touched upon, which is having some sort of a crowd or awareness of your product and your game or your whatever your thing is before you go to Kickstarter. You can't just expect to show up on Kickstarter and have people magically show up.
Yeah. You wrote a blog post that said it's not Kickstarter's job to give you backers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it appears like that to an outsider, right? But that's not Kickstarter's job. Kickstarter does talk about a few of the projects on there. Even then, it's not a magical thing. If you don't have good art or good graphic design, if you don't put together a great page, if you don't have fair prices, then none of those things are going to matter, even if Kickstarter ends up promoting it. Mm-hmm. What else do I wish people had told me? Yeah,
like what were some of the big mistakes you had made with viticulture? I mean, it funded. So, I mean, you did well enough to fund and to actually eventually what you do now. You started a company early on with that. So it did fairly well. You succeeded fairly well. But how could you have succeeded more? What could have been better?
The art and graphic design is definitely a part of it. That could have been much better. Really, when I think back about viticulture, I think of a few things that almost could have really prevented my company from ever existing at all. And one of them was that I kept throwing in new stretch goals. And I had a plan before I went into the project. I had budgeted out certain things. But during the project, you're on like a high during a successful project, because you have all these strangers from all over coming over with their ideas. And I'm learning on the fly to say no to some of those ideas. But in viticulture, I was saying yes way more than I said no. Mm-hmm. And the one near miss that really could have sunk my company very early on was that I had a metal coin stretch goal. And metal coins are not a stretch goal. They're much too expensive to do. Metal coins are a good add-on, but not a stretch goal. And I had a stretch goal for metal coins, and we ended like $2,000 short of that stretch goal. If we had raised just a little bit more and hit that stretch goal, my company wouldn't have had enough money to make Euphoria, period, and it probably would not exist today. Mm-hmm. So $2,000 difference because of that stretch goal. So I wish I'd budgeted that better and not said yes as many times to the enthusiastic backers who had so many great ideas. Yeah. But they're not the ones budgeting it. They're just coming up with fun ideas. It's my responsibility as a creator to budget. So
thank goodness you didn't make more money.
Thank goodness.
Crazy to say, but yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a near miss that I that's one of those things that I knew, but I didn't really know until I was there in the moment, because it's just, you really are on that you've experienced it.
Yeah.
The high of having people support the thing that you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
You get carried away.
And you get so much confirmation. You know what I mean? Like this time and effort and energy and all this I put into it, and people want it. They like me. They really like me kind of moment. And then that can go way off the deep end, and that's sunk a lot of people. It didn't happen to you, thank goodness, but it has happened to a lot of people. I backed a project a couple years ago. There was a big like comic book kind of thing, and then it became a hardcover, and then it became bigger, and then it got the slip cover over on the outside, or whatever it was. And the guy, I mean, he didn't have near enough money. When the project ended, he didn't have enough money to cover all the costs. And so he had to run another campaign to try to make up the money, especially because of the shipping. The shipping is what got him, because it went from like an 8.5 by 11 up to a 9 by 14, and the weight went way up, and that changed all the shipping numbers, and that totally ruined any opportunity to have a company, any opportunity to make money long term. And so I think that's another thing, is being aware of shipping. Like, have you run into some issues with that you were like, oh shoot, I didn't even think about?
Yeah, that happened with viticulture as well. I budgeted out shipping in advance, but I ended up thinking I was doing the right thing by simplifying it. So I grouped like all international countries into a $20 level, and then U.S. and Canada were free. And that was a really bad idea. And so when I was preparing to actually ship the games from the factory in China around the world, it was a little earlier than that. It really hit me that I needed to find a much better system. And that's when I came up with a system that's pretty well known today, where you send games to different fulfillment centers around the world, and those fulfillment centers send the games out from that region. Because up until that point, most creators had just sent all their stuff to like the U.S. and then shipped it out around the world from there. And that's how I was going to do it, but I would have lost a ton of money if I had done that. Because shipping to France from St. Louis is like $50, but shipping from France from Germany is like $10. That's a huge difference.
Yeah. No, that's the difference between having a company and not.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about that kind of money between, I mean, you having to work a normal day job or being able to run your own board game company. That's very much the difference, is figuring out how to do things as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible. And
right.
I'm really glad people like you have figured it out, so people like me can now borrow all that information and learn from it. What about from the moving on from Kickstarter? Anything else from Kickstarter to add?
I had one other thing about Kickstarter. If I remember, we'll come back to it.
Okay, cool. What about when you decided to become a company? When you said, I'm going to publish my own game, I'm going to do the whole thing. I'm going to become a project manager. I'm going to become a businessman, which a lot of people don't understand that there's a big difference between game designer and business person. What do you wish people had sat you down and said, all right, know this, learn these things?
Well, that's one of the things I actually think that I did right. And it's still a learning process. I'm learning to budget my time and use my time effectively. But the thing that I think I did right there, I know this is the opposite of what we're talking about, things I wish I had known, but I'm glad I knew this. Basically, when I funded Euphoria, I had almost $300,000 put in my bank account in one day. That's a lot of money to have in a bank account ever, especially all at once. And I think a lot of people, or some people, get that money and they feel like they actually have that money, that money really is in their bank account, and that they can quit their day job and spend all that money to make the thing and then send it out. But really, what I realized, and what I'm glad I realized, is that I didn't have that money at all. That money was there temporarily so that I could make the game and ship the game. And it was only really after I had done all those things that I could know, that I really knew how much money I had left, and if I could actually make that a sustainable thing instead of a one-time thing. And so the thing that I did was that I didn't quit my job the day after I funded. I kept that job for a while. I ended up going down to 4 days a week. And then I went down, then I fully quit after we had shipped Euphoria. I think I did that right. Maybe I could have waited a little bit longer, but I didn't quit my job the day after I funded, which would have been a huge mistake. Yeah,
realizing that money's not profit. It is not. Yeah, that all of a sudden, if you have $300,000 in your bank account, that's amazing. Until you have $305,000 worth of costs. Well, now you're in the hole, and now you don't have a job.
Right, now you don't have a job anymore. Yeah, exactly.
Or what I've seen other people do, and they fund, everything looks good, they made all this money, turn into like a mega project, whatever. Then they do quit their job, and then all of the business costs eat into the money that was supposed to go towards the game, towards the shipping and all that. And because they started a business, they don't actually have enough money to do the game. So they don't have enough money to do what people paid them to do. And a lot of people get very, very unhappy when that happens. Very angry people that want to hunt you down. It's amazing what you're saying earlier. People are very passionate about board games. And especially when, they drop $30 on a game and it's going to be delayed 6 months and they're up in arms. Like, they're crazy upset. And so let's talk about that. What do you wish what do you wish you knew about fulfillment and actually getting the game in people's hands that would have helped you out early on?
Well, this is a more recent lesson, but it ties off of what you were just talking about in terms of how passion and excitement can manifest in different ways. Because that passion can quickly turn to anger. Mm-hmm. It can also turn into a really high level of enthusiasm and joy. One thing I think I did right for all my projects, fortunately, was that I kept people in constant communication. So even if things were going wrong, if something was later or earlier, I would tell them, and I would tell them what's happening at the factory. And so it wasn't like I ended my projects and then 6 months later I had my next communication with backers. That was good. But what I learned on Scythe, fulfilling Scythe recently, was really about that. It was how emotionally draining it can be to manage or try to manage that passion in so many other people, and how that passion is manifesting. And really coming to terms with the fact that I as much as I want to have control over how people are responding to it, that I can't control that. The best I can do is communicate and try to get things done well. I know that's not very specific, but it's just I was surprised by the emotional toll it took on me. Things don't usually get to me like that, but it was just a barrage all day of people asking where their game was, and this was for a game that was shipping early. So even though we were ahead of schedule, doing everything great, I was still getting that barrage of requests and enthusiasm, but it was a lot to take on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that, failure comes with its own struggles and all that, but success comes with a lot of struggles as well. And let's talk about that. What did no one tell you about creating what some people call the best game of the year?
It's so weird to hear that because there's so many games that came out this year, so many great games. Yeah. But I'm honored that you think that, and some people really are enjoying Scythe. I guess that the biggest thing that I've kind of caught on to is how people's perception of what other people are liking or disliking. Some people call this hype, right? People's response to a game can be heavily influenced by that hype and how much excitement there is. So it really creates really, really high expectations. And so I'm changing the way my company works a little bit and to kind of decrease that hype a little bit. I want people to be excited about our games, but maybe not a year in advance, maybe just a month in advance, a few weeks in advance, so that there's a very short window between them getting excited and when they actually can receive that product, which is really hard to mitigate on Kickstarter, because Kickstarter, you pretty much have to launch it many, many months before you can actually deliver, so that hype, that excitement is spread out over a big period of time. But I've learned that with Scythe being so successful that the expectations that people have for it are really, really high.
Yeah. One thing I've learned just in normal marketing is always undersell and over-deliver. But like what you're saying with Kickstarter, you kind of have to sell it as best you can, because you want as many people to back it as possible, and you kind of need that hype to build the backer base and build the funding and reach those stretch goals and all that. And so, man, it's super difficult to manage all that. As far as managing the pressure, do you feel a little more pressure now? Like with your next game, does it have to live up to this same kind of standard that you've set?
I might feel that a little bit, but I'm still having fun with it. So that hasn't, I'm having fun with the Charterstone is the game I'm working on now. I'm having fun designing it. I'm hoping people will like it, but it's such a different game than Scythe that I understand if people don't like it as much, or if some people like it more. So yeah, I wouldn't say that's a big factor at this point, but maybe it will be when Charterstone comes out, if people really don't like it, or if they like it more. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how I respond when it comes out.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You can waste a lot of time feeling the pressure, but you're really creating that pressure for yourself. Like nobody's putting that pressure on you. Like nobody's going to come to your house and beat you up if Charterstone's not as good as Scythe.
Right.
But and no matter what you do, any creative endeavor, people are going to like it, people are not going to like it, people are going to love it, people are going to hate it. And you just create the best thing you possibly can, and you get to a point, you put your seal of approval on it, and then you step back and you feel good about it. And I think that's all you can do as a creator, or as a designer, or as a publisher, as all three that you are.
Well, and one thing I have learned from doing this, that I thought of as you're saying this, is being able to sit back and enjoy it, but at the same time, what I did with Viticulture and Euphoria is that I spent, I think, too much time reading reviews and all too often commenting on those reviews, especially on Board Game Geek. And I think that was a bad idea. I think some people did not react to that well, because for me, I'm just engaging the community, talking about the community. But sometimes those comments came across as defensive. Like if someone said, I don't like this aspect of the game because of this, I would chime in and say, well, here's the design idea behind why I made that decision, which I think to some people is interesting, but to others, because it comes across as defensive, like I'm trying to change that person's opinion of the game, which is not my role as a designer. It's not my place. And so I wish, so I've changed that method, and now I'm on Board Game Geek to answer questions and to clarify things about like if someone plays a rule wrong and they want to, I can help them play that rule correctly. But I don't comment on reviews at all anymore if I can avoid it, just because it didn't go over well to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a very valuable thing for people to realize and understand. One, as a designer, we do get defensive because this is our baby. This is our thing that we've put so much time, and we do want to defend it.
Yeah.
But that never turns out well. Like ever, that no one ever goes, "Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, I like your game now." Like that never turns out well, and it always comes across as defensive or like you're offended now, and it escalates.
Right.
And yeah, I think there's a lot of value designers can learn from just stepping back and letting the community, in that regard, be what it is. Being a guide, kind of guiding them. Okay, no, you played the rule wrong. Here's how it is.
Right.
But also an opportunity to learn. To say, okay, people I really don't like my game for this reason. How can I learn from that for my next game, so I can kind of figure some things out. Definitely.
Yeah.
But also not getting so engrossed in reviews. Like I know I've got a lot of friends that are authors, that get so caught up in that Amazon review, that 1-star Amazon review, and they just like they take it to heart. And it's like, well, people don't like your stuff. That's okay. Like let them not like it. You're going, like, the sun's going to come up tomorrow. You'll be fine. Don't take that as an insult on you personally when somebody doesn't like the thing you've created. Absolutely. Anything else that just kind of in general, anything that you had ideas coming in of things you wish you had known early on?
Well, I remember the Kickstarter thing I was going to say. One thing that before, when I was preparing for viticulture, I looked at a bunch of different projects and I created this big spreadsheet of what other projects were doing. Like looking at the prices that were effective or the methods they used that were effective or that weren't working. And one thing I kind of wish I had known at that point was that just because another project has done something and has been successful doesn't mean that it's good for my project or even the right thing for backers to do. An example of things that I've kind of learned from that are especially early bird rewards and exclusives. People have different opinions about those. I respect those different opinions. For me, they weren't a good fit after I used them. But I did those things because I thought that they were the right way to go, because I had seen successful projects do those things. Right now, there's a super successful project on Kickstarter called Kingdom Death Monster. This raised like over $6 million. And I'm excited for the guys that are running that campaign. I always worry, though, when I see a campaign like that a new creator is going to discover that and think, okay, if I have a reward level at $1,600, if I have an estimated delivery date in 2020, they're going to take the wrong lessons from those super successful projects. So I kind of think the idea is to be informed and back other projects and learn from other projects, but don't think that those things necessarily lead to success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it goes back to watching film, so to speak. Watching film that other people are doing, learning how you can kind of emulate and do well. But if you've got a 15-minute card game, a take that game, you're not going to make $6 million the way Kingdom Death has made $6 million. It's context. There's so much context that goes into it. And I think Kingdom Death, this isn't their first go-round either.
It's not, I think he had a failure, then he had a small success, and then he had a big success, and then this one.
Right, and so learning from that as well. This is not,
totally.
This is years in the making. But that's what happens a lot of times. We kind of compare our behind the scenes to other people's highlights.
Right.
And we look at what they're doing really, really well, and then it just doesn't work out. And so really understanding the context, what has led into that kind of a success or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Definitely. Anything else?
I think the one last note I had was that your first playtest of any game is probably going to suck. That happens with me. At this point, I consider myself a somewhat experienced designer. Inevitably, every first playtest sucks. It's going to happen. That doesn't mean that you have to give up on the game. Sometimes it does. I think you mentioned that earlier. Sometimes that means that it's not going to work. But that's another thing I've learned to prepare myself for that. And I just know it's not going to be fun. It's going to suck, and that's okay. And I can make the second prototype.
Absolutely. The difference between idea and prototype is a humongous, just a chasm of difference. Yeah. But then the difference between prototype 1 and prototype 2 is just as big, if not bigger, because you really find out, oh, that doesn't work at all. Oh, those numbers are way off. Oh, people hate this part of the game. Oh, I hate this. But you don't know that until you do it. But just like any other creative endeavor, the more you do it, the better you get. The more, and prototyping is really just practice. You're just practicing the game, practicing until you get to the point where you're like, all right, it's legit. We're ready to go. So that's absolutely great for new designers. Yeah, your game's not going to be any good. People aren't going to like it. Don't get offended. Don't get mad. Get better. Figure out what they don't like, why they don't like it, put it in context. Some people aren't going to like a part of the game that's actually really good, that actually works really well, or other people are going to find it really fun. And so the skill of playtesting cannot be understated of how to discern what information is good, what information you should not listen to, all of those different things. But the only way you learn those things is by doing it over and over and over again. You know, nobody can inject that into you. I can't give you a special cookie that all of a sudden you know all these things. And so doing it over and over again, man, you're dead on with that. Well, cool, man. Any other just kind of random thoughts floating around?
I think that hit all my notes. Yeah. Thanks for. I really loved what you've added to this conversation, Gabe. You've added some really great points. I love the comparisons to sports too. I think that really hits home. Yeah,
well, I come out of a football culture. I spent 12 years of my life playing football, and my body regrets that a little bit now, waking up in the mornings and whatnot. But life. It's funny how life compares to different things, and life compares to sports in a lot of ways. Life compares to board games in a lot of ways, and it's cool to kind of draw those comparisons out and figure those things out. And but I really appreciate you coming on the show. Episode 1, I think this is as good as it could have been. This is awesome. Really glad you're the first guest on this new podcast that I'm putting together. And Jamey, you're actually going to stay around. We're gonna talk about some of Jamey's favorite mechanisms in games. He does a really cool thing on his blog on his Facebook page where he talks about his favorite mechanisms. So we're going to go through some of my favorite games, and he's going to tell me his favorite mechanisms in those games. So we're going to have some fun in the bonus round here in just a minute. If you want to check that out, go to BoardGameDesignLab.com. You can find all the bonus material over there. You can also win free games and get some really cool other stuff that we send out on a weekly basis. So we're going to wrap this show up, jump into the bonus round. So really appreciate you tuning in. And Jamey, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Gabe. It's been a blast.
Thanks for listening. Find all sorts of game design resources, bonus material, and chances to win free games at BoardGameDesignLab.com. And until next time, keep designing, keep playtesting, and keep creating great games. Did I mention keep playtesting?